And we welcome now Dr. Albert Bourla. He's chairman and CEO of Pfizer. So, Dr. Bourla, thank you so much for joining us. When I think about big problems, we haven't had one as big for a good long time as COVID-19. There was cooperation between the private sector and government. I know you did not take money from Warp Speed, but you worked closely, continue to work closely with the government. Give us your sense of the status right now of the battle against this pandemic.
Yeah, and to start with, I think that this collaboration was pivotal, and we may not have taken the money, but it was a different collaboration. It was collaboration with the FDA, it was collaboration with the CDC, it was collaboration with NIH in terms of making sure that we conduct the studies the right way, and without their, let's say, collaboration, I don't think we would be able to do that. So the private-public sector was pivotal. Now, news about the pandemic, I think as we had predicted it, this virus is here to stay for quite a bit because has been spread all over the world and has this ability to create mutations and variants. But as also had predicted, we should be able to have it well under control as long as we get vaccinated. I think in the world, large parts of the world are getting vaccinated right now. I believe that within several months, almost the entire world will have enough vaccines to get vaccinated. And those countries that the hesitancy of vaccines is small, and those tend to be more highly educated, let's say, nations, I think that we will be able to go back to a normal life.
So, Doctor, before we turn to the world, I do want to talk about that. Let's talk about the United States and a couple of things that are pending right now. One is, people call it mixing and matching. That is with respect to the booster shots, getting a booster shot potentially of a vaccine, which is not your original vaccine. Where are we from what you know about where the FDA is on approving that mixing and matching?
I think they are considering the data. There are data that were presented to them, I think, by NIH, Dr. Fauci's lab, did the studies. They are very reliable studies, smaller numbers, but very reliable studies. I think they have done all different combinations. For example, us boosting J&J, Moderna boosting J&J, and then J&J and us boosting Moderna, and then J&J and Moderna boosting us. In terms of Moderna, they are using the full dose, not the half dose. And I think they are reviewing the data and they will make their decisions.
So you know the data, you've looked at the data, and I don't want to rush the FDA, I don't want to rush the government, want them to be careful. But from what you've seen, is it pretty clear we should be mixing and matching just to make sure we maximize the boosters across the board?
I think that it's safe to say that boosting, mixing and matching could work, and that could provide flexibility.
The other thing, Dr. Bourla, that people are very concerned about is children. And let's start with 5 to 11-year-olds. That is pending. I know Pfizer has submitted data. When do you expect a decision on that?
I expect pretty soon. Actually, I expect before the end of the month. Why I say that, not because I know how long FDA takes, but I know when they have scheduled their advisory committee, and it is before the end of the month. And typically in all these cases, FDA makes decisions within 3-4 days max of the advisory committee. So I think it's a question of weeks.
So assuming that that's right, Doctor, when should parents think that they could actually get their children vaccinated? What's the lag time before we actually can get shots into arms, assuming, again, that it gets approved?
Assuming it gets approved, we will be ready to provide this new formulation. It is a different formulation than the one that we are using for the adults. It's using 1/3 of the mRNA as a dose. And so we have done all the work to manufacture it at scale so that we will be able to provide it almost immediately.
Let me push it back even further. What about 2 to 4-year-olds? Are there data being gathered on that? Do you expect at some point we will be able to inoculate even children as young as 2?
I do expect to do that. Of course, the studies needs to be completed. I'm optimistic because I have seen these results between 5 and 11. For the 2 to 5 years old, the studies are ongoing right now. I think should be completed by the end of the year. And it is another formulation is using a very small fraction of the mRNA that we are using with adults. It's 2 micrograms compared to 30 micrograms that a normal dose compares, or 100 that Moderna's dose contains. So these 2 micrograms, I think we expect to be very, very safe and give good immune responses, so also those kids will be protected.
Well, let's turn now to the rest of the world that you raised before. Everyone agrees we need to get the entire world vaccinated at some point in order to protect all of us, because it travels across borders, goodness knows. What's the best way to do that? As you know, there's been a lot of pressure on Pfizer and on Moderna to free up the intellectual property. I know you said in the past that's not necessarily the most effective way to get the job done.
Not only the most effective, it has nothing to do with the availability of vaccine at this stage, and actually will be a blockage. But let me go to the positive. I think what needs to be done, it is that we will have enough product manufactured so that will be available for all, and to provide it at cost, that at prices that everybody can afford. Those are the 2 conditions, so that the entire world will be vaccinated. When it comes to the second, it's easy. We have resolved it a long time ago. We are providing the vaccine at the cost of a takeaway meal in the high-income countries, but in the low-income countries, we are providing the vaccine at half of this cost. And the middle and the low-income countries, we are giving it not for profit. Even going further, we signed an agreement with the US government that we will provide them 1 billion doses of our vaccine at cost, and then the US government, in turn, will provide it to the poorest countries of the world at free, completely free, 0 cost to the governments of the poorest countries. So with all of that, I think pretty soon the availability will change completely and dramatically in the other countries. The manufacturing, it is right now, we are standing at, we have made more than 2 billion doses, and we have released a little bit less than 2 billion, because it takes 1 month from the day we make them until we release them for quality controls. From this 1.7, 1.8, almost 550 has gone to low and middle income countries. By the end of the year, we will have released 3 billion doses. By the end of this year, which is in 2 months. And 1 billion or more, and likely will be more, will be given to low and middle income countries. And then, of course, next year, 4 billion doses that will go to the entire world. So I'm optimistic that will be enough doses for all, and everybody could afford it.
Dr. Bourla, as you know, having the vaccine is a necessary but not sufficient condition to get people inoculated. What about the delivery mechanism, particularly in some of the countries that are middle income, lower income countries? What can be done to overcome that? Who's working on that part of the problem?
I think that should be the main concern of WHO, particularly for the poorest countries, to make sure that the infrastructure, the hospitals are there. I think should be, of course, the responsibility of their governments, but also the responsibility of non-governmental organizations, that they should support building a medical infrastructure. So when the vaccines arrive there, they will be able to administer it. There is a lot of work going on right now on the ground, but still, I think they are not all these countries ready yet, unfortunately, but I think we need to make sure that we continue these efforts.
Finally, just to wrap this part of it up, Doctor, as you know, I have Pfizer. I got Pfizer, my 2 doses. I haven't gotten a booster yet. I haven't got the booster yet, though. How important is it to get that booster? Have you gotten your booster?
I did got my booster. I did it before I take a 2-week trip to Europe. It was quite high risk. I was going to see a lot of people. I went to 5 countries, if you include Vatican as one country. And I did my booster of the 3rd dose. And I think that there are clear recommendations in this country. People that are 65 and above, they should all do it. And people between 18 and 65, they should do it if their occupation creates exposure to them. Also, of course, if they have underlying conditions, all they should do it. So there are different recommendations that are changing over time in different countries. I'm telling you what it is, the recommendation in this country. And if you fall into one of these categories, I will urge you to do it as soon as possible.
Dr. Bourla, let's turn now to what comes next. As you said at the beginning, this virus is not going away. We're not past the pandemic yet, but we have made a lot of progress. What about the next pandemic? Let me ask you particularly about the coronavirus, because the coronavirus seems to come back in different forms through history. Does this mRNA platform potentially offer a vaccine that could cover all coronavirus?
I think that the mRNA platform has the ability to adapt very quickly. I don't think that we have proof that it will be effective against all coronaviruses, but I think that we have very high probability to do so. But when thinking about pandemics, we should not be thinking only about coronavirus. A pandemic can come through very different types of viruses, and not necessarily respiratory, could be other type of diseases as well. And if there is a lesson that we learn from this pandemic that stands out among the many that we learned, it is that we were lucky because we had a vibrant life sciences sector that was able to step in and produce solutions. Solutions when it came to respirators, solutions when it came to diagnostics, to therapeutics, and to vaccines. And I think it is critically important to learn this lesson and make sure that we create the policies, given that also this is about the public policies, this discussion, the policies that will create innovation, will make innovation flourish. So when and if there is a next time that we need science to win, we are in a position of strength.
What are the policies, in your judgment, that would actually facilitate that climate of innovation so whatever comes next time will be at least in a better position to handle it?
I think there are multiple. Let me start with what you started your question about regulators. I think we have seen tremendous achievements by having the private sector working regulators to produce life-saving vaccines. The question is if we were able to do it for COVID, why not for cancer? If we were able to submit a request to FDA and to receive an answer within 3 days rather than within 3 months, why shouldn't be able to do that when we're submitting a request and a question for a cancer vaccine in the future? That will require significant resources to be given to FDA and, of course, significant structural changes maybe. But I think this is the time to do it because now we know that it works. The same comes to how we will make sure that there is a thriving life sciences sector, and the intellectual property is a very big part of what drives significant amount of capital thrown into this sector. Unfortunately, it's not goodwill that will bring cure of cancer. It is billions of dollars that are invested by people that they are willing to spend again and again and again for 100 projects until one of them will be successful and 99 will fail and they will lose their money. This is the reality that we are living. So these are significant questions for policymakers.
So, Dr. Bourla, you mentioned cancer a couple of times there, which is awfully tantalizing. Explain the science to me because I don't understand it. Does the mRNA breakthrough that this represents, can that possibly help us on cancer?
Yes, it can. There are a lot of efforts are been going for years right now, even before starting for vaccines. The cancer is growing like a foreign body within your organization, but somehow they have a mechanism that is able to evade the immune response of your body. So your body doesn't recognize it as a foreign body, like a virus, for example, so it can attack it. And there are a lot of efforts that are happening how to mobilize your own immune system to fight your cancer. One of these efforts and one of these technologies is by using the mRNA. There are also vaccines that you can use or immunomodulators, but this is one of the quite promising approaches. Hasn't given yield fruits yet, but it is heavily studied as we speak.
So, Dr. Bourla, you've described some of the climate that you think that we need to have flourish in order to make sure we can deal with the next disease. Talk to us about something that we've heard a lot of in other contexts, and that's supply chain. Was supply chain a significant hindrance for Pfizer? Is it a challenge to this day? And if not, how did you make sure you had the sufficient supply chain?
It was a major challenge in the beginning of the pandemic. Keep in mind that what drove governments to do was to kind create the protectionism. So they started restricting imports and exports. And our vaccine is made of 186 different components, 186 different components that are coming from 19 different countries. And you miss one of them, you can't have the vaccine. So, everyone is as important as all of them. So we had issues in getting some of these raw materials, either because, first of all, we scale up manufacturing capacity very rapidly, and there were not enough suppliers in the world to provide them, but also there were, let's say, trade barriers. That was not good, and eventually everybody loses when we try to do that. So I think maintaining during pandemics and during periods of crisis, open trades, it's very, very important, and that very important for all.
One of the things that we have heard recently, coming out of the pandemic, frankly, is that we need to diversify our supply chain. Is that something that's important in the pharmaceutical area, to have more than one country that maybe could supply some of these?
I think it's always good, particularly in periods of crisis like this one. For example, when we started, we have two separate lines that they were twins. One, they were both doing the same things. One in the United States that was supposed to provide vaccines all the way to the Americas, from Canada all the way down to Latin America. And the other one in Europe that was supposed to provide the European continent, Asia, and Africa, all the way to Australia. And this is how it worked in the beginning. Now we are mixing more. So we are sending from the US to Asia and from Europe to Latin America as the production lines are, let's say, as the production is allowing us. But it's very important because you can't have only one manufacturing site doing it. Imagine if an earthquake or something creates an issue, you can't risk something like that.
Dr. Bourla, you described some of the atmosphere we need for innovation in the pharmaceuticals area. And I wonder about one government policy that's being suggested, proposed by some right now, and whether it would affect our ability to deal with the next problem. And that is some limitations on prescription drug prices. That's something, as you know, that comes up periodically. It's up again on Capitol Hill. If, in fact, they went forward with that, would that constrain the industry's ability to respond to the next pandemic?
If they come in the form that they are discussing, yes, absolutely. But let me clarify a few things, because that's a very important issue. I think we do have a very big issue with drug pricing in the United States. I think the Americans right now are paying for their medicines like if they don't have insurance, although they do have. But let me explain how the situation is. The total healthcare cost and of pharmaceuticals within the total healthcare cost is 12%. The governments, for example, will pay, the US government or the commercial plants are paying 12% of the total cost for medicine. So by definition, that cannot be the big issue. The issue is that when it comes to medicines, the Americans have to pay it almost all out of the pocket. And in fact, in inflated prices, because the list prices are almost double than the net prices that we are providing to insurance companies. That needs to change. And I am in favor of all radical changes that will ensure that the out-of-pocket cost of the patients is reduced right now. That could mean incremental cost. And Pfizer and my peers, CEOs, the industry is willing to participate and pay big part, if not our fair part, very big part, more than the fair part, of this cost. But what we don't want to do, which is some of these proposals are doing, it is they're taxing significantly the industry, enormous amounts that will just go to the black hole of the federal budget rather than go to the out-of-pocket. For every dollar that they take from us, if it goes straight to the pocket of the patients, they will have our blessing.
So just to make sure we're clear, because this is a terribly important issue to a lot of Americans, what you're saying is, okay, we can certainly live with some caps, some limitations, some reductions in drug prices, as well as the beneficiary of those reductions is the patient rather than the federal government.
This is exactly what I said. If it is the beneficiary, as long as the beneficiary is the American, the patient that is paid when he goes to the pharmacy, we are willing to do more than little. We are going to do a lot.
So, Doctor, one last one here. I mean, Pfizer is, for many people, a hero right now for coming up with this vaccine, as well as Moderna is, but Pfizer is a real hero. Are people just beating down your door to come work for you? I mean, we hear a lot of problems about recruiting new people. Are people just flocking to Pfizer right now to say, we want to be part of that team?
Yes, they do. I think it has created tremendous momentum for life sciences in general. So it used to be times that young people really had an affection to work for the tech industry. They wanted to study things that are related with the tech industry. They wanted to work in these, let's say, mega companies of tech. Yeah. The pandemic and the fact that the life sciences sector demonstrated the value to society has reversed the situation. More people want to study now, science and medicine, and they want to work for us. And we see that every day. And particularly for Pfizer, because of the reasons that we explained, we have the benefit of attracting now the best. And I'm very pleased about it.